Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in to my first video on my new YouTube channel, Genuine Questions. I started this because about 5 years ago is when I really started paying attention to what's going on in the news and following certain news stories that I found interesting. And the biggest thing that I noticed when I started doing this is the lack of journalistic curiosity when it comes to certain topics and certain people that they just do not ask questions on. And I'm just sitting here in my living room seeing this story, and I come up with these questions, but nobody else really seems to ask. So, and whenever I've had the chance to explain this stuff to people, they're like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't think about it like that. So I'd like more people to maybe start asking some of these questions for themselves, maybe find a couple of people that are like-minded with these questions too. So I figure I'll just put it out there and see what everybody thinks. So I picked this first topic because this is the first topic that got me interested in following these news stories, and that topic is the murder of Seth Rich. So the backstory with this one is about, it was the summer of 2016. Seth Rich is a 27-year-old DNC staffer who was shot in the back when he was walking home one night to his apartment or house or whatever in Washington, D.C. He's shot in the back. His watch, wallet, keys, cell phone, all of his valuables, though, are left there at the scene. Nothing was taken. And the police, they labeled this as a botched robbery. And so my first question is, how do the police know it's a botched robbery? I mean, that might be the case, but how do they know that? If nothing at the scene indicates that they were trying to rob him because all the stuff was still there, how do the police know botched robbery? How do you come to that conclusion? So there's a comedian that has a YouTube channel, Jimmy Dore, and I like his videos a lot, and he actually talks about this in one of his, and I like the way that he explains it. So I'm just gonna let him, I'm gonna play his clip and let him kind of go over this one for you guys real fast. So, it's pretty funny.
Well, I like they refer to it as a botched, the police refer to it as a botched robbery. Could there be a bigger botching of a robbery? You didn't take anything. They didn't take his wallet, his watch, or his cell phone, or his money. That's a blue. You could not botch it any more harder. You did kill the guy though. So you did the worst thing, which is worse than robbery. You killed the guy, but you didn't take anything. Doesn't sound like a robbery. Does that sound like a robbery to anybody else?
No, definitely not.
Why would they call it a botched robbery? Why would they just call it an unknown murder, an unknown reason? You got to put a name to it, a botched robbery? What indicates that it was a robbery? Not a goddamn thing was taken. So why would it be a botched robbery? That's not a botched robbery is when they steal everything from the guy and they end up killing him. Then it's botched because you're not supposed to kill a guy you're robbing because that's worse than robbing the guy. That's a bigger charge. So that's why it would be botched. Something went wrong, they ended up killing him. You kill someone during a robbery when something goes wrong. You don't kill someone and then not rob them. Am I wrong about this?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, usually there has to be evidence that there was an attempted robbery to designate it
Zero
as
evidence.
such.
So zero evidence there was a botched robbery. And again, how do they know that? Why is it not a botched carjacking? Why is it not one of those like gang initiation killings where you just have to kill a random person to prove that you're suitable to be in this gang? How do we know he didn't come up on somebody getting kidnapped or mugged and they shot him because he was a witness? How do they know that? There might be an explanation for that, but why will the police not give it? That's really interesting to me. So the Seth Rich's family, they weren't really buying the botched robbery story at first either. And so they hired a private investigator. His name, I believe, is Rod Wheeler. And Rod Wheeler starts to uncover evidence that Seth Rich was in communications with WikiLeaks and Julian Assange and was possibly the source for the DNC email hack that happened that summer. So once this information starts to come out, and Rod Wheeler, he's going on Fox News, he's talking to Sean Hannity about all this, it blows up in the media, the family fires the private investigator for the reason that they do not want to politicize their son's murder. Which, fair enough, I can understand that. But what doesn't jive then is their next move, which is to replace that private investigator with a man named Brad Bauman. And Brad Bauman's job, if you're familiar with the show Scandal at all, he's kind of like an Olivia Pope for the Democratic Party. But again, I believe his official title, if you look at his LinkedIn page, is a PR crisis consultant. And most of his work is done for the Democratic Party. So my first question with this development then is, if you don't want to politicize your son's murder, why would you replace him with an arguably political operative? That is what this person's job is. Why would you not either just drop the case because, hey, it's getting too political and we can't pull out of it now, or find somebody who is truly nonpartisan and independent who won't go on Fox News and, you know, blab all about all the stuff that he's finding? Why would you replace, if you don't want to politicize your son's murder, why would you replace him with a political crisis consultant? Which brings me to my second question, which is, why is this a crisis for the DNC in the first place? That they would need to hire this guy, send this guy in. It's a botch robbery. He's at the wrong place, wrong time. Could have happened to anybody. Why would this be a crisis for the DNC? And then the third question, which might not make much sense when I first ask it, but I'm going to show one more Jimmy Dore clip that will put it all in context. But this Brad Bauman, family spokesperson, DNC crisis consultant, if he is genuinely interested in finding out the truth to why Seth Rich was murdered and helping this family who has hired him, why is he dismissing evidence that does not yet exist? And so here's the Jimmy Dore clip where he is going to read some Brad Bauman quotes, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's very curious commentary from a person who ostensibly is trying to find the truth about someone's murder.
Brad Bauman said, even if purported emails were to surface, it would not necessarily mean Rich had helped WikiLeaks. Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily mean it, but it would pretty much look like it means it. Wouldn't necessarily, but it looks like it. Come on. Quote, even if tomorrow an email was found, it is not a high enough bar of evidence to prove any interactions, as emails can be altered. And we've seen that those interested in pushing conspiracies will stop at nothing to do so. It sounds like you're trying to discredit evidence that will be found in the future. That's what this sounds like. Yeah, it sounds like this isn't what you think, even if you find evidence of it, Bauman said. That's what this sounds like, right? Isn't that's effed up? Even if we find evidence that it's probably fake. What? That's what that is. That's crazy. That is crazy that he said that.
I agree. That is crazy. Even if you find stuff, it's fake. We're just laying the groundwork for our defense before the stuff even comes out. So some of the evidence that connects him to WikiLeaks, quite frankly, I don't really care what Rod Wheeler says. You know, like when you go on a, you know, hyper-partisan political news program to tell your story, I guess he's flip-flopped a couple of times on, you know, where he got his information, that Seth worked for WikiLeaks and all of that. He's not really the most credible person to me in this story. But who I do take some credit to what they have to say is Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. Because you may support what WikiLeaks does by exposing corruption within certain organizations. You may not, you may agree with their methods, you may not. But nobody is accusing WikiLeaks of making up the information that they expose. The criticisms are surrounding what they do and how they do it, not that this is false information that they are just making up and putting out there to smear people. So, given the backstory and the history of WikiLeaks and how they operate, I'd like you to listen to this video where Julian Assange is talking to, I think this guy's a Swedish reporter, and listen to what he says about WikiLeaks and their sources and the dangers that they go through when they give this kind of information to WikiLeaks. And they're pretty undoubtable who he is talking about in this interview here. Here you go.
The stuff that you're sitting on, is an October surprise in there? Do you even know what you're sitting on?
WikiLeaks never sits on material. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material, and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old who works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
That was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
no, there's no finding. So
What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks, and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources
why
are.
make a suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington?
Because we have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States, and that our sources are, our sources face serious risks. That's why they come to us, so we can protect their anonymity.
But it's quite something to suggest a murder. That's basically what you're doing.
Well, others have suggested that. We are investigating to understand what happened in that situation with Seth Rich. I think it is a concerning situation. There's not a conclusion yet. We wouldn't be willing to state a conclusion, but we are concerned about it. And more importantly, a variety of WikiLeaks sources are concerned when that kind of thing happens.
And then, so after that interview, this is the tweet that the official WikiLeaks account tweeted out, where they're offering $20,000 for information about Seth Rich's murder. So, given that they have never been accused of being liars before, why, in this case, is this the first one that they're just making this up? This is just a random botched robbery, wrong place, wrong time. How would Julian Assange have even known about it and known the guy's name and his job with the DNC and put out this $20,000 reward for information about it? There's never been an explanation that I know that has said to like the motivation to why Julian Assange would do that, and only this one time. So another interesting player in this story is Donna Brazil. This is Donna Brazil here. So Donna Brazil is the person who took over the position of head of the DNC after this email hack happened. Because the woman who was running the DNC, Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, she had to resign because what these emails showed, the content of them, was that the DNC was rigging their primaries in favor of Hillary Clinton to get Bernie Sanders out of the way. So Donna writes this book, and she says, we'll do some quotes from it right here. I'm quoting here from a PolitiFact article that's actually a fact check. The claim is that Donna admits in her book that the Clintons had Seth Rich murdered. And PolitiFact labels that as a liar, pants on fire. And I mean, technically they're right. She does not come out and say that it's the Clintons, but she does say some pretty interesting stuff that I think is worth taking a look at. And PolitiFact doesn't really want to ask any of these questions. They just want to call you a liar, pants on fire if you question the official Seth Rich story. So let's read these quotes. So in her book, Brazil wrote about the grief and fears she felt in the aftermath of Rich's murder, even closing the blinds in her office so a sniper couldn't see her. So, why is Donna worried about being sniped after a random botched robbery? If this guy, Seth Rich, was just wrong place, wrong time, got murdered walking home, crime of opportunity, why is she worried about snipers? Why is she closing the blinds in her office? Why does she think she's going to be a target? What would she have to do with this random botched robbery? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But she goes on. Brazil wrote that she felt some responsibility for Rich's death. I didn't bring him into the DNC, but I helped keep him there working on voting rights, she wrote. Why would helping Seth Rich keep his job cause her to feel guilt over his random botched robbery murder? How are those two things connected? If his job had nothing to do with why he was murdered, because it's a random botched robbery, why does she feel guilty about that? If I had a friend at work who I did something and helped them keep their job, and then that person randomly got murdered in a robbery attempt, why would I feel guilty for having helped them keep their job? Those two things supposedly don't have anything to do with each other. Why is Donna connecting them? Nobody's asking her that. They just call you a liar, liar, pants on fire if you ask that question. So, interesting there. And I think a really great way that they could actually debunk this conspiracy theory, because that's one of the things that drives me crazy about the story, is if you go and Google Seth Rich's name, 99.9% of the articles that are going to come up are going to, the headline will label this as a debunked conspiracy theory. How is it debunked? Like, the police say it's a botched robbery, they never tell you how. Like, did they just called up the DNC and asked them, and the DNC said, no, like, we didn't kill him for leaking our emails, it wasn't us. And that's debunking something, just calling the accused and asking them, hey, did you do this? And they say no. Debunked. What kind of journalism is that? And not just journalism, but what kind of FBI investigation is that? Because shockingly, that's exactly how the FBI conducted their investigation into this. The whole premise that of the Russia-Trump collusion narrative goes back to Russia used WikiLeaks to hack into these DNC emails to help Donald Trump win. And all of that is based on the fact that the DNC says that's what happened. They got to hire their own private company. The name of that is CrowdStrike, which isn't super important for this particular episode, but does come into play in later episodes of the saga. So please remember the name CrowdStrike. But CrowdStrike is a company that the DNC was allowed to hire to examine their own email servers. The FBI requested access to those email servers so they could see it for themselves. And the DNC said, no, we'll tell you who did it. And then you can just base your investigation off of that. And so they hire CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike comes out and says, it was Russia. It was all Russia. And the FBI used CrowdStrike's report to base the next 2.5 years worth of investigations into the president based on what his political opposition party says. If you don't believe me that that is how the FBI conducts themselves, you can watch James Comey say it for himself. Right here in a congressional hearing, he is asked about this. I'm not basing my view that this is what happened on random conspiracy theory. This is straight from the horse's mouth, James Comey. So check this one out. This is wild that this is how the DNC conducts investigations into a political organization. It doesn't sound independent or not partisan to me at all. So here we go.
believe there's some confusion, or at least some conflicting reporting as to whether the FBI requested access to the DNC's services, the Democratic Congressional Committee servers, and John Podesta's personal devices. Did the FBI request access to those devices to perform forensics on?
Yes, we did.
And would that access have provided intelligence or information helpful to your investigation and possibly to finding to the findings included in the intelligence community assessments?
Our forensics folks would always prefer to get access to the original device or server that's involved. So it's the best evidence.
Were you given access to do the forensics on those servers?
We were not. We were a highly respected private company, eventually got access and shared with us what they saw there.
But is that typically the way the FBI would prefer to do the forensics, or would your forensics unit rather field the servers and do the forensics themselves?
We'd always prefer to have access hands-on ourselves, if that's possible.
Do you know why you were denied access to those servers?
I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure.
Was there one request or multiple requests?
Multiple requests at different levels. And ultimately what was agreed to is the private company would share with us what they saw.
There you go. Straight from the FBI director's mouth on how they conducted that investigation. They don't know why the DNC won't let them look at it. Who knows? Didn't seem like a question worth asking. We just decided to let them hire their own investigators, do the work for us, and then we'll just base everything that we do from there on their conclusion. Really interesting to me, because I don't know if this is true, but I can look at this whole fact pattern that we just went through, and I could also see the story this way. If you go back and look at the way the news was reporting on this and how top officials within the Democratic Party were talking about it when they would go on the news, you'll see that they never wanted to talk about the content of their email, which show that they were rigging their primaries. That's not fair democracy. We get to pick our own candidate. They actually got sued by a bunch of Bernie supporters in a class action lawsuit over this, because these Bernie supporters said they would have never donated their money to the Bernie campaign if they would have known that he never had a chance because the system was rigged against him. And the DNC went to court, and their legal argument to this was, we are allowed to do that. We are a private organization, and we reserve the right to pick our own candidate. Yes, we have a charter with the rules, but we are the ones who wrote those rules, and we can change them at any time. And the judge agreed with them that legally, yes, they are allowed to do that. But that is them admitting under oath that they rigged their primaries. They picked their candidate. The whole primary process for the Democratic Party is a charade to make you, the voter, think that this is a fair process and you have a say in who they're going to nominate. But they've admitted in court, you don't. And that's in part, what their emails expose. So if you are going to do that strategy where you're going to deflect from your own misdeeds in the content of your emails, and you are going to change the conversation to make it about this foreign entity, cybersecurity hack, security threat, what would stop the person who actually hacked into your emails and released them to WikiLeaks? What stops that person then from coming forward and saying, it was not Russia, it was me, I saw what you were doing, and I wanted to blow the whistle on the corruption? You cannot let that person stay alive and risk them coming forward and now not only expose your corruption, but also expose that you try to gaslight everybody with the Russia story. That person is now a liability for your false claims that you're making. And that's why that person has to die. And that's why Botch Robbery, even though nothing's stolen and nobody really has any curiosity to understand how they came to that conclusion. And that's why the DNC doesn't want anybody to be able to examine their servers and see that, oh, this wasn't an overseas hack. The download speeds actually show that this was an inside job, more consistent with somebody sitting there at the actual computer with a thumb drive plugged in. You don't want people to see that. So that's why you hire your own investigative team that's going to come to whatever conclusion you pay them to come to. That makes sense. That seems to be a logical explanation for everybody's actions in this story. That's why, oh, the family fires the private investigator and they have to hire a DNC crisis consultant. Because that's why this became a crisis for the DNC. That's why Donna Brazil is worried that, oh, this had something to do with his job. That's why she feels guilty over this. The only thing I still don't understand is why the FBI is okay with letting the DNC run their own investigation into themselves. I don't understand it, but it's clear based on what James Comey said, that is what happened. And the fact that no journalists, no investigators, no regular people seem to be super concerned or curious. But that's the way our Justice Department and our news media does things now. So that's all for the Seth Rich story I have today. I just want to close out here with one last clip where it's Joe Rogan talking about it, because it's like he crawled into my brain and stole all my thoughts about this one and then perfectly lays it out here in one of the episodes of his podcast. So I'm just going to let him finish it up for me. But I thank you guys all for watching, and I hope you tune in for future episodes where we circle back to a couple things that have happened and go over what I think the genuine lingering questions are on those topics. Thank you, guys.
But when it comes to things that are rock solid and clear, like that Seth Rich was murdered and people want to ignore it, I'm like, what the fuck do you think happened? There's has to be some sort of a disconnect here. When a person is giving information to WikiLeaks that exposes corruption inside the very organization that's responsible for the fucking Democratic Party, and he gets murdered, and you're like, oh, the conspiracy theories. No, he got murdered. There's no conspiracy. It was a botched robbery. Says who? Says who? Where's his, how come his wallet was there? How come his watch was there? How come they didn't take his phone? What the fuck are you talking about that I'm a conspiracy theorist when I just tell you the facts? And this WikiLeaks thing with Julian Assange is the craziest shit ever. When he said there's consequences to sharing information with us. And everybody's like, he works for Russia now. He works for Russia. So he was the darling of the left when Obama was in office. So isn't that